Welcome back to Tracing the Sky. So in the last few videos, we've been looking at the relationship between the motion of the stars and then also the motion of the sun, and then looking at how the sun moves over time. But there's one aspect of that relationship that I want to clarify a little bit more, and so I'm recording this kind of addendum video to help make a few things more clear. The first thing I want us to look at is what happens if we track where the sun rises and sets over time. And this is a really valuable thing you can do wherever you live, right? Seeing where the sun rises and sun sets is something most of us can do. Now, this is not something you have to do every day, but it's really interesting to take, a year and go out and see where the sun is rising and at what time, and then also where it's setting at what time, a few times throughout the year, right? A couple times in winter, maybe, October and December, and then again in springtime, maybe March and May, and then again throughout the summer and fall. So it's a good thing to try and do so you can just make a note of where things are. But in this video, I'll show you how to do it using some of our tools. So let's have a look. Okay, let's start by having a look at where the sun is rising on December 1st. So it's about 8:10 in the morning, so that's right after sunrise. And you can see that the sun is over here. Now, what's interesting is take a look at how far south it is, right? So it's still, eastern, but it's pretty far south. So it's not due east. It's, the sun's a little further south than that. So that's something really important to notice is where the sun is rising and at what time it's rising. So it's rising at around 8 a.m. and it's, a little bit further south in the sky. So let's drop a marker, and then what we want to do is compare where the sun is rising at different times of year. So the next thing we're going to do is look at where the sun is rising in March and see how it compares to where it's rising in December. So let's have a look. Okay, so here we are on March 1st at 7:10 a.m. And so have a look. We're just after sunrise, right? So it's 7:10 a.m. and the sun just rose. So it rose an hour earlier than December 1st. And take a look at how much further north the sun is, right? It's almost exactly due east, right? So here we have where the sun rises on March 1st, and here's where it was on December 1st. So over the course of those months, the sun has been rising a little bit further north each day up until this point right here that we're looking at. So let's do this a few more times. Let's take a look at now at a summer month of July and see where the sun is rising. Okay, so it's now July 1st, and have a look at how much earlier in the day the sun's rising and how much further north it is than when we first started, right? We originally started over here, and the sun was rising at around 8:10 in the morning, versus now it's rising at 6:20 in the morning, and look how much further north it is. So over this span of time, the sun has traveled quite a bit. And now what's happening is each day it's moving a little bit further north along the horizon, at least where it's rising. And it's rising a little bit earlier each day. Now, I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, so I'm in the northern hemisphere. And so what I'm seeing is based off of where I am in the world. If you're in the northern hemisphere too, and you did this outside, you would see something similar, though exactly where the sun rises would change. We'll talk about why that is in future videos, but for now, just know that you might see something a little bit different if you do this where you're located in the world. Okay, let's have a look at one more position just to see what happens a little bit, into the fall months. Okay, so now it's October 1st, and check this out. This is where the sun is rising on October 1st. It's about 7:20 a.m. And just take a look at this. So the sun's trajectory from December to July was going further north and rising earlier in the day. And then as we go back from summer to fall and are approaching winter months, the sun then kind of rebounded and started going south again. And you can see that by October 1st, the sun's almost kind of back to where it was on March 1st. So you can see this really interesting progression. As we're moving from winter to summer, the sun's starting point each day where it rises is moving further and further north, earlier and earlier in the day. And as it's going back from summer to winter, it's going in the opposite direction. Now let's take a look at where the sun sets on each of these dates so we can see kind of how this arc is starting to form. Okay, so here we are facing west, and it's just before the sun is about to set. So you can see the sun over here, and it's about to set. Now, one thing that might stand out for you, first of all, depending on where you are in the world, is how early the sun is setting. You know, if you're somewhere a little further south than me, now's a good time to have some sympathy. You can see that it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and it's about to get dark out. So that's what we live with in Vancouver during the winter months. But you can see that the sun's about to set, and just like where it was rising in December, it's a little bit further south, right? In December, when it was rising, it was in the east, but it was pretty far south from the eastern marker. And here you can see it's still setting in the western area, but it's quite a bit further south than like exact west. So now what I'm going to do is just overlay the rest of the months so you can see where the sun is setting, in March, July, and October. So you can see, how that compares to where the sun rises in those months. So let's have a look. Okay, so now I've got all of the same dates mapped out that we had when we were looking at the sunrise. And to start, I want to focus on December, March, and July. So you can see that as we're moving from December, from the winter months to the summer months of July, the sun's setting position is traveling a little bit further north. So each day, where the sun sets is a little bit further north. And that's the same as what we saw earlier, where it rose was moving a little bit further north. And where we saw the sun rise was a little bit earlier each day. Here we're seeing the sunset is a little bit later. So as we move from the winter months to the summer months, the sun is not only rising earlier in the day, but it's also setting later. So you kind of get the extra effect of even longer days because of an earlier sunrise and a later sunset means the days are getting longer and longer. Then you can see that as we go back to the fall months, so from July now moving back to the fall and winter into October, the sun is now starting to set earlier. So, at its peak here, it's setting at 9:30 p.m. and here it's setting at 6:50 p.m. So the sun is setting earlier again and moving further south. So now we'll zoom out a little bit and see the sunrise and sunset positions together so you can really see a full picture of what's going on. Okay, so here we are really zoomed out so we can see where the sun is rising and setting at the same time throughout the year. And so one small change I made is that instead of July, we're going to look at August, just because we can't fit July on the screen at the same time as all the other months. So we've got August in blue here where it's rising, and then over in the west you can see a blue marker for where the sun sets in August. You can see December here at the other extreme of winter where it's rising, and then the west where it's setting, and then green for March over in the east, and then over here in the west, green for where it's setting, and then orange for where the sun rises in October and where it sets in October. And so what you can immediately see is how much narrower the arc is going to be in December, right? The sun is going to rise and set, and the arc is going to be quite narrow, especially when you compare it to August. Look how much wider that arc is going to be. If you remember, we also know that in the summer months, the shadow is shorter, which means the sun is higher in the sky. And you can see that's going to be the case. The sun's not going to go like straight across and travel a further distance in the summer months. We know that it's going to get higher in the sky too. So the arc is higher and wider in the summer compared to the winter. We know that the shadows are shortest in the winter, so not only is the arc narrower, but you can see that it's going to be shorter as well. So the arc's not going to be as high in the winter months either, and we know that from measuring the shadow. So I hope this helps you see the change in how the sun is moving over time, right? The arc is much wider and taller in the summer, much narrower and shorter in the winter. Okay, so I think we've taken a really great step towards really understanding how the sun moves and really expanding on what we saw with the sun's shadow over time and connecting to that to what we're seeing with the sunrise and sunset. In the next video, we're going to tie this together with the zodiac and see how the zodiac is really dependent on the sunrise and sunset as well. So I'll see you in the next video.